Okay. Okay, everyone. Welcome to the 10-minute guide space. Thank you for making the time. We are going to start now. I was hoping that Mark, the gentleman whose case we're doing today, was in attendance, but Mark doesn't seem to be here, so it's fine. We'll just continue and do the case anyway, and then take it from there. As usual, what I've done is I've put together a quick presentation to help us along with the case, and I'm recording it via Zoom. So you will be able to access this presentation on YouTube in the next 24 to 48 hours. It's got audio, it's got the presentation, so you should be able to see it. That shouldn't be an issue. As usual, I'll just sort of do a quick introduction, and then we'll start with the case. And as we did in the last space, I'm going to ask every one of you to participate in the space. Any questions before we get going? Any housekeeping issues? Anyone want to share something? Nobody? Okay. Okay, cool. So let's get going. So today's space is really a focus on chapter 23 of the 10-minute guide to starting a business, which is getting advice. So what we want to illustrate today is, number one, why it's important to get advice. Number two, why it's important to get advice from the right people. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to look at the case of a Nigerian business. This business does heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and also does electrical work, electrical installation, servicing, and maintenance. In fact, as I talk to you, let me go into my inbox and share the. Let me share the picture that Mark sent us. So when I published the space to say we're going to have a space on the 13th of May, one of my requests was that entrepreneurs who've got businesses that are 0 to 3 years old should share the business problems that they have, and then we are going to discuss it through the space. And one gentleman from Nigeria shared that. So let me do this. Let me share this with you. A picture of his business so you can see all the services that Mark and his business partner do. Just tweeted that, so you should be able to see that. It's attached to a tweet that's linked to the space. So what we'll do today is we'll talk a little bit about what the 10-minute guide to starting a business is about. Some of you have the book, some of you intend to buy the book. And then once we've done that, we'll then get into what today's space is about, and we'll get into studying this particular case. Okay. And then, of course, we'll open the floor for questions. So the idea is we solve a problem together. And what we'll do is then we'll use the guidance that's in the 10-minute guide, but also get you guys to engage a little bit so we can work through the problem together. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so the 10-minute guide to starting a business, what is it and what's it about? So the 10-minute guide to starting a business is a technically focused business building manual. The book reads in under 2 hours. It's about 76 pages long. Under 2 hours, you'll read the book end to end guaranteed, but you'll reread it many times. Part of the reason is that the book was deliberately designed to give you all the information you need to be able to read and apply as you go along. And it makes it easy to reference. So as soon as you start implementing the guidance in the book, you'll realize that you'll start to experience the book and the guidance in it very differently based on just reading it. What the book does is it focuses on the technical or core competencies that are required to build a profitable business, and not just any business, a profitable business. So the information that's presented in the book is simple, straightforward, is presented in a simple, straightforward language that allows for comprehension from kids even as young as 14 years old. The book is available in e-copy and hard copy, as some of you will know, and the book is currently available in e-copy across all major platforms. If you are outside of the African continent, you can buy a hard copy of the book from Amazon Books. Okay, cool. So let's get down to business. Okay, so today's Twitter space is really about saying, how do we make sure we get the right advice from the right people so that we're able to architect our business properly? One of the challenges of being an entrepreneur is being isolated and existing in an environment where people around you don't support you, don't give you the right advice. People don't believe that what you want to do can be done. And so quite often what then happens is that the process then of building a business becomes much harder, and entrepreneurs quite often tend to feel alone. And so it's important as an entrepreneur that when you start your business, or when you're thinking about starting a business and you're planning to start your business, you get the right people around you, but also you make a proactive effort to source the right kind of people. And so what do I mean when I say the right kind of people? What I mean here is to say the kind of people you need to get around you are people who are either entrepreneurs themselves, people who own businesses, people who own businesses before, or people who understand the entrepreneurial journey. That's particularly important because the experience of running a business is very different when you are actually doing it versus somebody watching you do it. So you may have watched a parent, a friend, an uncle, a neighbor run a business. That experience from you watching it will be very different from you doing it as an entrepreneur yourself. And so that's what this conversation is about. So as we start this conversation, I want you guys to think about what you're here to do tonight, why you're here, and what your purpose is in life, your purpose in your business. And I want you to think about where you're going to go from here, where you're going to take the knowledge that you learn from this space and how you're going to apply it. And the reason that's important is because one of the critical success factors from an entrepreneur perspective is being able to figure out where you're going so you know exactly where to start and how to apply yourself. And that's what the 10 Minute Guide is about. And that's what this book is about. Okay. So today's space, getting the right advice, chapter 23 of the 10 Minute Guide. As usual, if you have a question, please request to be a speaker, and then we'll mic you, and then you can ask your question. Okay. So let's check in. Can everybody hear me clearly? Zugo, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm good, I can hear you.
Charles, can you hear me? If you can, please throw an emoji, a heart, or whatever. Max, can you hear me? V, can you hear me? Balisa, can you hear me? Mike Temba, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. V, can you hear us? Thanks, Charles. Balisa, can you hear us? Okay, I'm not too sure if Balisa and V can hear us, but we'll get going. So the business we're doing today is we're solving the case of a Nigerian business called Blue Bridge Integrated Services. So what Blue Bridge does is they do, so I'm reading from their poster, which I've just tweeted. So if you go to my tweets, you should be able to see that. Also, it's in the presentation that's being recorded on Zoom. So you will have access to this on YouTube. So Blue Bridge does mechanical and electrical services in commercial and industrial buildings. They do HVAC systems. So where HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. They do system installation for that. They do ductwork, chillers, DX units, VRF, package units, central cooling, and ventilation. They also do electrical services, piping construction, welding, fabrication, pipe and tank installation, NDT testing, dredging pipes and supplies, plumbing installations, sanitary systems, potable water supplies, HDPE, PPRs, and UPVCs, etc. So these guys do quite a lot. And so Mark's question to us was, I had a contract with a corporate. We did some work for them. And then all of a sudden, this corporate stopped giving us work. What do we do? How do we get the corporate to give us more work? So what I want to do now is I want to take a little bit of a break from speaking. And I want to introduce my co-host today, Zugo. So Zugo Ngeman is my co-host. He's a friend of mine, and he's also a business partner. And Zugo runs a management consulting business, and he sits on a number of company boards. So the idea was myself and Zugo then would work through this case together, along with all of you, and we'll try and see how best we can solve Mark's problem. Okay, so the case, this business had a tender, they completed the work, and all of a sudden, they're no longer getting any work from this company. It would have been great to have Mark come and talk to us, but he's AWOL. So I'm going to put that question to the floor. How do you guys think we should solve this problem? How do we get the corporate to give us more tenders?
Yeah, maybe it's good time for me to come in.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah. So thanks, Andy. So I think things that came to mind when I was looking at the poster of the description of the business itself, I immediately thought of one of the chapters in your book that talks about, you must start with what you are good at. Mm-hmm. So looking at this type of services right here, there's a lot of specialization. Some of the items here, for example, NDT test, these are mining services for non-destructive tests, for blasting and all of that type of stuff, welding and whatnot. So there's quite a lot of things that may look related, but they require different sets of skills or specializations, and which for me, perhaps this enterprise here could be in a situation where they are offering too many, but they are not mastering it yet. So I think for us, it's of interest that the guy is present, Mark, but is not here. But the most fundamental thing that I would have wanted to understand from Mark is, what is it that they specialize in, right? Mm-hmm. The name of the business talks about Blue Bridge being integrated services, but what is the specialty that they are offering? Mm-hmm. So, for example, in my case, when I started out a business, I started a business as an accountant by profession, and I built up the skills from there, knowing that the core of the business was accounting and getting into other areas of professional services. And as we grow, we're transitioning into other areas, and we get to offer these services because we've got the skills, within the business to offer this type of services that we are putting out there. But in this instance, you get electrical, like your air cons and all of that type of stuff. So he's got two of those. He's got HVACs, which are also mechanical stuff. He's got additional electrical services. So my point of interest would have been to understand what is the cost as a start, so that we can then understand whether the value proposition of that core of the business is actually being communicated correctly to the prospective clients, and if there are feedback or any feedback from the one corporate that they've worked with and all of that type of stuff. We can use this as a practical case and use it as a base for doing the steps to do right.
Yeah, so what I will say is, and when Mark posed the challenge to us, what his view was, look, this corporate that we're doing work for, we were installing heating and ventilation systems for them. So essentially, Mark's question was, how do we get them to keep giving us heating and ventilation work? So I suggest that we work off of that, and then we sort of try and solve that problem in that respect. Because if we do try and tackle all of it without Mark's presence, it would be like singing in the dark. And so what I've actually done here, is I've actually put together a PowerPoint to sort of help us walk through the problem solving for Mark's case. This would then give us a good view of what the problem is, how to tackle it, and what methodology to use to tackle it, and what sort of chapters in the book we can reference. Girls, I'm going to ask you to come in here if you don't mind. What I would like to do is I would like to get your opinion on what you think we can do for Mark. So Mark had a tender. Tender got, well, they did work, they delivered. The project was 2 months long, and then the corporate didn't give them any more work. I'd like to hear from all of you what you think went wrong. If there is anything that went wrong, maybe was it just like a sort of a very short project, and once the work was done, the corporate no longer needed them, considering that they were installing a heating system. Who's doing the maintenance? Was the corporate not happy, and did they find somebody else? I'd like to hear what you think, what you guys think. Pause, Current Mama, V, Gali, what do you ladies think? Everybody's shy today. No one? No suggestions? No guesses? No guesses, Paul. Karen Mama, what do you think? How do you think we can get this corporate to offer these guys more work? What's your suggestion? Look, also remember, please remember, there is no right or wrong answer. The point of this exercise is that we work through the problem solving so that we get to an answer together. That way, it builds an architecture of how to think about the business problems when you face them. So if you have a contract, if you have a customer, if you have a contract or a customer, and the customer all of a sudden stops giving you work, what do you do? So what we're looking to do is get to a point where we say, okay, let's make sure that if we get caught in that situation, we are able to solve it. Calls?
Thank you, host, and good evening to everyone. My network keeps cutting though, but I'll try and respond to what I heard.
Yes, absolutely.
The issue could be caused by various reasons. I think those could be the customer service, maybe. There could be maybe the material that was used, maybe it was not durable and they were not happy with that. Okay.
So customer service materials may have not been good enough or not durable enough. What else?
Yeah, or perhaps maybe the pricing as well. Maybe they got a better code somewhere else.
What else?
And yeah, it could be different reasons, I think.
Okay, perfect.
I think
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. For Mark, I would say maybe he could go back to the drawing board and try to trace back like where he went wrong, maybe for the next time, maybe he might not make this one, but maybe he could go back to try and improve for the next time that will come. If not, he doesn't get this one back.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Coles. Those are great ideas. Those are great suggestions. So, so some more information that Mark shared with us was that they haven't received any contract work in a year and 6 months. So obviously, when this client decided that they were going to stop giving Mark and his team work, that decision was final, and they moved on and probably either found somebody else or the project ended. So what we're going to look to do then is say, okay, so what did Mark do wrong? What could they have done? So fortunately, there's a very good way to deal with this, and that's dealt with in several chapters in the 10-Minute Guide to Starting Your Business, beginning in chapter 4. But what we're going to do is we're going to walk through it together. So corporates canceled the contracts. We don't know what to do now. We're not really sure. They haven't given us any feedback. They haven't said why they've canceled the contract. So we've just got to figure it out ourselves. So what I want to do now is I want to change the conversation slightly, right? So in order for us to understand the problem that we're trying to solve, which is why aren't we getting any work? I want us to understand this matter from a corporate perspective. So what I'd like to do is say, okay, you are the corporate, or you are the person that works in supply chain. You are the person that appointed Mark as your service provider, and you've decided to not give him any work. So I've worked quite a lot with businesses in this situation, and Zuga has, I'm sure, as well, where people get tenders, people get 2-3-year contracts, and all of a sudden these are canned. No explanations given. Sometimes they'll tell you it's rotation, but we never really know. So I want to tackle this problem from a corporate perspective. You're a corporate. It's your job to find a supplier. I want to talk about how you as a corporate person would think about getting a supplier to supply heating and ventilation services for your business. So let's take suggestions. What would you be looking for if you were a corporate person and you're in charge of supply chain?
Referrals is one of those that you need, something that can validate, the service that the prospective supplier is offering. Mm-hmm. So in this instance, one of the things that Mark should have done was to engage the client, to continuously look for feedback. At the end of the project, at least have that, in a reference format, because your next client wants to see that that you're dealing with was actually satisfied of what you're doing.
Yes, that's perfect. That's perfect. So that's perfect. But that particular perspective will reserve right at the end. So I want to come back to it closer to the end of the space when we open up the floor for a general discussion. But what I want us to do here is I want us to think about how we would go about securing a service provider if we were a corporate supply chain person. So one of the easiest ways to do problem solving is to look at it from the other side of the coin. So that's what I'd like us to do, to say, okay, we are the corporate. Our building needs some air conditioning, it needs some ventilation. What do we do? What are we looking for? How do we think about it? Once again, there is no right answer. We're just shooting ideas just to try and see what we can do with this problem. So, and remember, if you're the corporate supply chain person, it's your job to look for a supplier. So how would you go about looking for a supplier if, winter is coming as it is now, and you need to get some heaters in your building? Where would you start? How would you think about solving the problem? What kind of suppliers would you look for? Would you even look for suppliers, or would you tell your colleagues, your other employees, to bring their own heaters? How would you think about this problem? Anybody brave enough to suggest?
From what I've seen, within the South African landscape, corporates, they do what we call technical specifications.
Yes, yeah.
In terms of what it is that they are looking for. Then they set these criteria that will eliminate any risk, of exposure from unqualified service providers, those with little experience. So there's thresholds, like at least you must be in business for 2 years or 3 years, all of that type of stuff. In some instances, they will put like revenue sizes about, and they want a host of things that can validate your ability to actually execute. But the most important one is the description of the technical specification in terms of what it is that is needed. So that's where it will start for me, because I must first define the problem I'm looking to solve, so that then I can communicate the specifications I need to whoever is likely responding.
Perfect. So why do we need those specifications? I mean, why do corporates go, these are the specifications, these are the criteria for how we are going to select the service providers? What are we doing as a corporate when we do that? What are we looking to do? Go ahead, Sue.
It's the function of narrowing the channel so that you only deal with the entities that fit what you need. So that, in an economy where you might have 2 million enterprises offering the same thing, not all of them are going to meet all the specs. So you're narrowing the fit. You only want those who actually fit what you're looking for to be the ones that respond with the propositions and all of that.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. You're absolutely spot on as well. And part of the reason we do that, right, is because we know a number of things about small and medium businesses that corporates also know, right? So if you're a corporate, you know that small and medium businesses in general are often unstable. So number one, their workforce is often unstable, especially if these people do project work. So there's a large turnover of the workforce. So especially in things like construction, especially in industrial work, especially in services and this kind of work, 1 week it's another set of workers, the next week those workers don't show up, so you've got to find a new set of workers. So we know that. So we know that the SMEs are often unstable. The workflow, so the workforce turns over very often and quickly. The second thing we know, though, about small and medium businesses, if we're looking at it from a corporate perspective, is that small and medium businesses have inconsistent cash flows. So money comes in and out of the business inconsistently. So as a consequence, sometimes they've got money, sometimes they don't. Third thing, often we know that small and medium businesses don't always have enough money to run the business day to day. Okay. Sometimes they'll have money and sometimes they'll not. And so as a consequence, because they often don't have money to run the business day to day, when work is issued, they will often ask for either a cash payment upfront or a deposit for the work that has to be done. So at least they can go and find resources or get some other thing. In South Africa, what happens is when a small and medium business gets a project from either government or from a corporate, and they don't have the money, they can go and do what's called invoice or project financing. So they can go to a lender and say to this lender, hey, we got this project, it's such and such value, please lend us money. Once you've lent us this money, we'll do the work and come and pay you with the interest. So that's some of the things, that's one of the things that small and medium business can do to get money. What else do we know? So we know that small and medium businesses, when they do get work, when they do get projects, they often look for additional staff to help them complete the projects because there's often not enough people in the business to finish the job. And part of the reason that is because small businesses don't have enough money to have a large staff complement. And so what they'll do is they'll employ people and staff on a project basis. The fifth thing we know about small and medium businesses is that small and medium businesses often struggle to meet compliance requirements. And that's what Zugo alluded to earlier when he was speaking about the requirements, the strict requirements that corporates put out when they publish a tender. Meeting compliance requirements is expensive, and depending where you live and where you are in the world, you may or may not be able to meet those compliance requirements. Sometimes what they'll tell you is you have to get this certificate. For instance, in South Africa, if you want an environmental certificate for you to be able to recycle e-waste, that license costs 150,000 rands. So you're looking at about 9 to 10,000 US dollars or so. So automatically you can see that that requirement would be a barrier for a lot of people starting a recycling business. Okay, so another thing that we know about small businesses that corporates also know is that small businesses often rely on corporates to help them with an advance money-wise, or help them get equipment to execute the work that the corporate needs to get done, which then puts an extra burden on the corporate. Another thing that small and medium businesses often struggle with is getting funding to finance the project, to buy machinery, or to pay people. Huge factor. And in South Africa, what often happens is business gets a project, they can't raise money to execute that project, and they end up losing it and ends up going back to tender because they can't get money for some other reason. And we'll tackle the issue. We'll tackle the issue of funding. And Zugo is an expert here from a funding perspective in terms of how to get funding, where to get funding, how to think about it, and how you can sort of prepare to get funding. And lastly, what we also know about corporates, what we also know about small businesses that corporates know, is that when a small business goes and loans machinery, once the project is done and delivered, they often have to return that machinery. But once the machinery is returned and the corporate needs some maintenance done, the small business is going to go back and raise some money to go loan back the machinery and go and service or maintain whatever needs to be maintained. So these are some of the things that corporates know about small and medium businesses. So with that view of what corporates know about small and medium businesses, what does it mean for how that corporate is going to think about choosing service providers? So what are they doing in essence? So let's go back to what Zugo said about setting criteria and putting in project requirements and those sorts of things. So when they set that, what are they doing? What is the corporate trying to do when they're putting those requirements? And so that's a question for you guys. So what's the corporate trying to do? Knowing what we know now about small business. Remember, there's no right answer. What's important is participation, walking to the solution together. Yes, Klaus, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
in your mind you're defining the outcome that you're looking for, which then enables this narrowing of the specifications that you need. But I think what Sandy is trying to get us to think about is when you're doing the specification, in any instance, do you see any risk in such a way that when you eventually get the service provider, there is very minimal that could go wrong. And when you have to spend the money, I'm sure you guys are familiar in a South African setting. I think there is very limited opportunity for a service provider to get an upfront payment on the job. But we see that all the time. And when that happens, then the job is never done, or it's never done correctly, or it's never finished. So what you want is we define those specifications to get enterprises that are fit for purpose, that are fit for the job, that have the financial capability to execute. You don't want people who are going to come and still want you to be the one that pays for the primary things that they need, the tools that they need to execute the job. So everything must be ready. They must be fit for purpose. So I think that's why specifications, are critical.
Absolutely.
Just last week,
Go ahead, Joe.
Just last week, if I may add, one of the enterprises we're working with at a board level, needed to appoint a audit firm to come and audit, on behalf of the funder, because it's a funder requirement that the company must be audited. But what the MD of that company had done was to just send, a closed invitation to audit firm. The issue here is the technical specifications of the audit were not defined. To say that there are three types of funders. You get a commercial funder, you get a DFI, you get two DFIs, one is offering grant, one is offering credit. But all of them have audit requirements. So, and the invitation or the specification by the MD didn't indicate what it is that the audit is needed for. So do this exercise now, where we issue out a new technical specification for the audit. At the same time, we narrow the source, where we source, these auditors. So in South Africa, the auditors are regulated by the independent regulator of auditors. So now we send the specification to the regulator to say, can you help us find within your group of elite accredited firms this type of auditor that will be able to do this job? So we're already minimizing the risk. We're looking at it from the risk perspective from our side. But there's a lot of things that you could be looking to realize in that process. But for us, we didn't want to be dealing with the chance taker. We wanted to know that the enterprise that we work with is actually fit for purpose. I'll stop there.
Absolutely. So thanks, Zua. Thanks, boss. So what the both of you highlight and what the both of you point to is the need to minimize risk. So if you are a corporate and you're in charge of the supply chain, or you're in charge of getting suppliers on board to provide services to either a department or the corporate, your biggest responsibility is to minimize risk to the business, especially if you are in charge of supply chain for a multi-billion-dollar company. Whether or not that is a state-owned company or whether that's a private company, your sole job is to minimize risk. And in a situation like this, right? So if you imagine you are corporate supply chain for a multi-billion-dollar company, that company has a very large building. That building now needs heating and ventilation services for its entirety. And now you have to go out into the market and appoint a service provider. And part of the reasons that corporate appoint external service providers as opposed to internal ones is because they don't want to have people come in, do work once, and then have to pay them over and over again when the work is done or when there's no work to be done. So as a consequence, what corporates often do is they'll then outsource. That's in the rest of the world. In South Africa, there are employed what's called BEE laws, broad-based Black economic empowerment, that compels corporates and government departments to give business to Black entrepreneurs and Black businesses. So corporates, even in situations where they can do the work internally, would often put this kind of work to tender. And so the people who are then in charge of the supply chain in that corporate, their job solely is to minimize risk. And so, like the both of you have pointed out, there are then criteria that they set to go find a service provider. So now, I want us to drill down a little bit. And I want us to look at this procurement process from the view of a supply chain manager. You're the one that's in charge of appointing. And I know in a lot of situations, what often happens is there's more than one person, but let's presume for the sake of argument, for the sake of this illustration, that you're the one that makes the final decision. You are a supply procurement manager. You get paid 700,000 rands a year. So you are looking at about 70 to 80,000 US dollars annually. And you get rewarded there on how well you spend your procurement budget, which you are given, and how well your service providers do. Okay. And you are now in charge of appointing a service provider to put in a heating and ventilation system for a $4 billion business, because this heating and ventilation is absolutely necessary for that business to work. So now I want you to think about, how would you approach then the identification of a service provider? So what I will do then is I will type up the examples that you guys have shared. So let's do this. Let's stop sharing here. So what I want us to then do now is tackle it from an individual from an individual compliance manager perspective. So the both of you highlighted two critical things. So the one is, we've got to set criteria around which we are going to then select these service providers. Number two, we've got to make sure that the risk of this service provider not delivering is minimized. What else would we need to do? So number one, set criteria. Once again, I'm typing all of this up on a PowerPoint presentation, which is being recorded on Zoom. You should be able to find this on our YouTube channel. I'll tweet the link after here, so you'll see the last presentation and you'll see this one tomorrow. Okay, so let's talk about this. So what else? So we set criteria to minimize risk. Sorry, Zugo, you mentioned that we document requirements, right? For what you want done specifically when you appoint by the service provider once they're appointed. Okay, so document requirements, the technical specifications, that's the word I was looking for, that's the phrase. Technical specifications for the work to be done. Okay, what else? What else do we need to do? So compliance framework. Framework. Perfect. Okay. So indemnity to indemnify who? The corporate.
So let's say for example, as an implementer of the job, something goes wrong, and now the corporate wants to sue me. Then the corporate doesn't have to wait long for that to happen. The indemnity just pays out, and the job can continue.
Okay, so indemnity, for instance, so essentially insurance, for instance.
As a service provider, yes.
Okay. So who, sorry, Zuba, I didn't quite get you. So who needs the indemnity, the corporate or the service provider?
The service provider. Okay. So the corporate would specify that, you need, because they would have a value for the job that they're trying to realize. And I would say that you need to
Okay. So the service provider needs to secure indemnity or insurance for that project, for the value of the project. Cool. Do you want to share with us? Do you want to share with us quickly? What else do you look for in the space that you work in when you, if you know, so when you're in charge of procuring from a service provider? What else would you look for? How else would you go about it?
Okay, I'm not really in the space of procurement. I'm working as a customer in that department.
Yes. Okay.
And, yeah.
So
Yeah.
So when you say you're working as a customer, close, what you're saying is procurement will go out and find service providers on your behalf.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So what we do is we write scopes of work.
The scope of work. Okay.
Yeah, like it's called, like, I guess it's what Google was referring to as specification. So
Okay.
we write the scope of work and then give it to procurement to go and procure for us.
Yes.
And in that scope of work, that's where we obviously list all the requirements that we are looking for.
Perfect.
And that in turn is what we're gonna use now to evaluate when we're doing the selection process and stuff.
Okay, so is that so? Tell me, maybe you and Zuo, because I don't know, so I'm asking here genuinely. That scope of work or that technical specification, is that a living document? So is that an evolving document? So for instance, does it allow for you as the customer, the corporate, to consistently monitor and be able to determine whether or not the service provider is doing a good job and whether or not you can terminate their contract right then and there if things are going left? Or is that generally not done?
For me, in the area that I'm in, it's specific for that point in time. And I work in training and development. So if we're gonna have training, if perhaps it's first aid, we're not gonna use the same scope of work that we used maybe for firefighting because the requirements are different, because trainings are different.
Okay.
So for each training that we conduct, we're gonna do a scope of work that is specific to that type of training. That's like the blueprint of it all is the same. We need you to be accredited. We need the training to be accredited. Things like that are like the blueprint of that.
Okay, that's beautiful. That's brilliant. So, and this highlights a point that you touched on earlier, Zubo, around Blue Bridge services, right? So, what Claus is saying is when we develop a scope of work, we will develop the scope of work for the particular type of work that we want done. Every piece of work has got a different scope of work, and we use that then to go out into the market or to go to the compliance officer and say, we want somebody to do X, Y, and Z. When we first looked at the poster that Blue Bridge has, the thing that quickly jumped out at us was the fact that they offer many services. So what does that tell you as a service provider? Sorry, as a corporate, as someone who's looking to appoint a service provider, what does that tell you about this business? If you are looking for someone to specifically come and do your air conditioning, and someone gives you a profile and they literally do 16, 17 things, they provide 16 or 17 services. How do you think about what does that say to you as the purchasing customer or as a customer.
On a lighter note, it's the older age, jack of all trades, but I would assume that that's why for me when we started, I was just looking at this thing in a sense that there's too much on offer, and a lot of it is repetitive. They actually specialize. If they are selling themselves, what are they good at?
Absolutely.
So in a bunch of 20 of these books like this, I would choose maybe the one. If I'm looking for an electrical skill, I would just choose the one that says electrical professional.
Okay.
If I'm looking for an HVAC, I would probably choose that. But like Carl was saying, the specifications differ depending on what it is. Some of them can be mixed, and matched. I know one of our projects, the mechanical guy is also the electrical guy, but when we look into the profiles, we can see that even though it's happening under one business, there are two different leads that specialize in these professional services, but under one roof. So there's looking for us to see, in this instance, where it is that is actually happening. But I would always go for a guy that specializes in the solution that we're looking.
Absolutely. So now what we've done is we've taken the corporate perspective and we've said, okay, so if we're the corporate, what kind of service providers are we looking for? How do we go about the process of looking for a service provider? And how do we manage it? So we've said we'll set criteria, we'll document technical specifications and or a scope of work for a particular piece of work to be done. We'll then build a compliance framework that the service provider has to meet. And one of the things that we'll require from the service provider is that they have indemnity or insurance against anything happening and they're unable to complete the work. Insurance pays out and the work gets done. And the situation then gets handled legally if need be. Okay, so it's fantastic. So now we have the view of how a corporate sees this thing. And we've tied it up by saying, and we've tied it back to our case business. And we've said, our case business offers a lot of services. And as someone who's looking to procure a service, we are most likely to go and procure a service from a service provider that offers a limited range of services, or that specializes rather in one or two of these services. So essentially what this has brought us to is the fact that if you are procuring from a corporate perspective, your primary job is to minimize and manage risk. Service provider risk to make sure that the work gets done. Right? And how do you manage that risk then when you source it? How do you make sure that that risk is zero? We develop the criteria that we've developed. Now, and here's where it starts to matter. Depending on the environment and depending on the work that needs to be done, there may be compromises and there are situations that do not allow for compromise. If you think about situations where some heating and ventilation equipment has to be installed in a mine or a mine shaft, that becomes a life and death issue. If you as a service provider, for one or other reason, are not able to either turn on an air conditioner when it needs to be on to cool the mine shafts, or you set it in such a way that the temperature it pumps into the shaft is high, you could potentially kill miners. In South Africa, we've got zero tolerance for death of miners. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Zero. So if a miner or miners do die in such an accident, mining is stopped, and quite often, and sometimes it's at the, at the behest of the minerals department, sometimes at the behest of the corporate, but fundamentally the work is stopped and mines lose millions of rands daily for any stoppages. So as a compliance manager, you're looking to say, I don't want that to happen. I want to make sure that this doesn't happen. And if you choose the wrong service provider, your neck is on the line and potentially other people's lives. So, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, son, some people contacting me here that are trying to get into the space to speak or something like that. But I can't see them, but they are contacting me. I can't see them on the space. I don't know if you can see Ncomita there.
I can see anybody on the space as well. Let's see. You are Zugo, you are co-host, so they should be able to, because I don't have anybody blocked.
Yeah.
I don't have anybody blocked. Would you mind just asking them, so what's happening? What's happening when they click on the space link?
They are here, they're listening, but they just can't seem to send requests for speaking.
That is super strange.
Yeah. Okay, but anyway, let's continue. I'm sure the thing will solve itself as time progresses.
Okay. A quick one here, Zubo. Can you access or see the settings for the space?
Yeah, I've been sending everybody an invitation to speak.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, I don't know, we'll see.
Okay. Okay, so Ncomisa, add speakers. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see who we can add. Let's see who here. Yeah, Ncomisa got an invitation.
Yeah, I don't know if she can accept or can accept, but I also see that. But let's continue. I'll try to manage it. I thought maybe it's something wrong on my side.
Okay, no, I think it's just generally, it could be just Twitter itself. Could be the app just not working. Okay, so then we now know that, so what is one of the ways, so well, let me track back a little bit. We now know how a corporate thinks about sourcing service providers. So what's one of the ways in which they minimize this risk when dealing with service providers? So, I mean, we've spoken about all of the criteria. We know now that, look, they're in a situation where they have to source from small and medium businesses. So if they do have to source from small and medium businesses, what's one of the ways in which they can manage that risk? Goals, you may be saying something, but I can't hear you. Can you hear us? If you can, please show an emoji or a heart or something.
No, I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. Apologies. Okay, so one of the things that we know happens with corporates is one of the best ways in which they manage the service provider risk is they do a service provider rotation. So what they'll do is, now it happens in South Africa. Previously, it used to be service providers by government and by corporates would get 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 year contracts to do work. And as more service providers have come online and as more entrepreneurs are looking to get work from corporates or government, now what corporates and government do is they rotate service providers off. And so that's one of the ways in which they minimize risk. Because if they've got a service provider and that service provider delivers some of the time, and some of the time they need help with either a cash advance, or they struggle to get machinery, or they struggle with their employees, one of the best ways in which that corporate or service provider manages that risk, which they have to, because they can't afford to be in a situation where they are caught flat-footed and bad things happen. One of the ways in which they do it is they rotate service providers. So now, this is now the last portion of our conversation. Let's now switch sides. I'd like us to solve this problem now. We are Bluebridge Services. We had a contract with a corporate, and now the corporate has terminated that contract. Over the last 18 months, we've sent them emails, we've sent them SMSs, We've said, listen, give us work. We're here, we want to do it, no feedback. So now we are in a situation where we have to survive. What do we do? And this is a problem a lot of businesses face, whether in South Africa, in Europe, in America, in Nigeria. Most businesses that offer technical services work on a project basis. And when they do get corporate work, often if they get more than 3 to 5 years, they are lucky. Mostly it's just short-term project work. And if we are caught in a situation where we were given short-term project work and our contract is terminated, how do we move forward? What do we do? How do we solve that problem? Once again, there's no right or wrong answers. Let's troubleshoot this thing.
You just go back to your asking.
So what I'm asking is, so now that we know the problem from the corporate side, I'd like us to deal with the problem from the SME perspective. Now, I'd like us to place ourselves in the shoes of Blue Bridge Services. And Blue Bridge Services has not received any work from this corporate in 18 months. They've sent emails, they've phoned, nothing's happened. So now I'm saying we are now the directors of Blue Bridge Services. We haven't received work from this corporate. How do we move on? What do we do? We have to eat, we have to keep our business running. What do we do? How do we go forward?
When you offer a service, it's very important that you continuously engage the client to understand, if are you meeting the levels of expectations that the client has, or are you off the mark? Because that is what helps you to improve as a service provider. Before you even finish the job, you already know whether you are doing well according to the merits that they're expecting. So that engagement, the stakeholder management profiling, what you do, will give you some ideas as to where you are in terms of the service that you're offering. But if you don't engage, and sometimes even if you're not engaging, you can always get that feedback from the client, because the client will tell you if you're doing well or you're not doing well at all. So and it's important to always seek that validation when you are a service provider. It's a different type of validation when you're the client, because you're the one that's spending the money. So that it's important to understand whether you're giving what you're supposed to be giving, or you're receiving what you're supposed to. So that loop or that gap has to always be closed, and you will know whether the satisfaction is not.
Absolutely, right? But let's say that we've been reaching out to this person, and they say to us, no, there's nothing wrong. We were happy with your service, but they're just not giving us any work. Where do we go from there? I mean, as business owners, where do we go? Because this is a problem we often have to face, right? Is what problem are we solving here then, in this case?
So if I may come in, right, maybe specifically to this Blue Bridge issue. So depending on where you are, there are safety requirements, right, for each building and all of that stuff. So your safety officer may say the air conditioning or the HVAC systems or whatever needs to be verified and serviced every 3 months, 6 months, or whatever the time frame looks like.
Yes.
So when you are seeking that validation, to confirm if your client is satisfied with the job that you've done,
yes,
you want to know whether are you up for the second phase of the service. Because as I'm giving this example, HVACs are air conditioning system.
yes,
so there's a continuous need for them to be repaired, to be maintained, and all that stuff.
yes,
And it's very regular.
yes.
So you want to know, am I going to be up for the next gig? If not, how long will it take before I'm next in line?
Right.
Provided that you're satisfied.
Perfect.
So that's the type of conversation that I would want to have with the client.
Okay.
I want to know whether they're good enough. Am I good for repeat business? And if I don't engage in that way, it means that I'm not planning for the next phase of the business.
Right.
So what we don't know here is whether Blue Bridge has had those conversations with the corporate, or they just did the job, collected the money, and went, because now there is also this big profit that we're referring to here.
Yeah, so that's perfect. So what you allude to, Zubo, excuse me, what you are alluding to is what we discussed in the 10-minute guide in chapters 4 to 6, which is we've got to figure out, based on our services, what problem we solve. Now, if we look at the particular case of Blue Bridge offers too many services. And if we are the board of directors for Blue Bridge, and we've got to now figure out where we go from here, now that we're not getting business from a client, our first port of call, in order for us to move forward, in order for us to secure any more clients after this, in order for us to move forward, we've got to figure out who we are, what problem we solve as Blue Bridge. Because if we don't figure out what problem we solve, we can't then take the next step, which is figuring out how painful that problem is and for whom that problem is painful. So let's bring it down to HVAC, right? So for whom is it really important to have heating, ventilation, and air conditioning? And how important is it to have it? So if we are looking, and let's presume we are all directors of Blue Bridge, and we are now brainstorming about where we go from here. It's been 18 months, we haven't had any business. We've been dealing with corporates previously, and we haven't won for the last 18 months. Now we're brainstorming a way forward. And so now the question we've got to ask ourselves is, what problem do we solve as Blue Bridge? Let's start there. Let's start with looking at that. What problem do we solve as a business? And let's presume that the only service that we offer is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So I'm putting it to you as my board of directors to say, what problem do you think we solve? Chapter 5 of the 10-minute guide to starting business. So let's brainstorm. Let's brainstorm it as a team. What problem do we solve? Or what problem are we solving with our heating, air conditioning, and ventilation services? Because that speaks directly to who we are as a business and why we exist. Sfundo, do you want to jump in? Proudly S as well. Tato, Speakery. Do you want to jump in and offer some suggestions?
I think the name HVAC on its own sort of predefines temporary, because you're dealing with heating, ventilation, and whatnot. So for me, me, it would be about, now that I'm in this space of ventilation, who actually need the service, right? So the industry is broad, like we talk about hospitals, they need their temperatures regulated all the time. We're talking about office buildings here.
Yes.
We're talking about shopping centers.
Yes.
We're talking about a lot, even residential households, they've got these units now, depending on the climate conditions. But you have to define that market, because this HVAC work is specialized. So once it's specialized, the pursuit is for you to get close to the target market that you're looking at.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And because of the specialization, right? It's like when we started a business, we knew we were accountants. So all we want is everybody who's on the CAPC database, because everybody must do financials, must do compliance. So we know that if we get those guys, we will get business. But once you get into that frame of mind, you realize that there could be 3 million of these guys actually are not even making money. So you already got 3 million guys that you can use. So you must focus maybe on the niche that is actually making the money that's it.
Absolutely.
And also the level of expertise that you have also determine the type of clients that you get.
Yes.
So that will be a departure point for me in terms of the service is defined already because it's a specialized service in the HVAC space. But who is it that needs it? That's where we must look, because when you get one job from a client, it doesn't mean that client will always give you that second opportunity or the referral.
Yes.
They may not even want to tell you that you are bad at the job, because they can see how much effort you are putting in. So they might not even want to break your heart, because they can see you really, really tried. And so they will keep quiet, but they will not refer you to the next client.
Absolutely.
So as a business person now, you need to say, how big is the ocean? Is it a blue ocean, or is the ocean full of sharks? So how do I get my fair market? So you start to do what needs to be done, which I think we are going to get to.
Absolutely. So let's give girls a chance. Girls, you want to share with us?
I don't understand like a broken record, but I agree with the speaker. Sorry, I forgot your name.
Zua.
To me, this is okay. To me, it's and as a business, like as we are speaking, I'm understanding that identity is everything, just like a person.
Yes.
A business is a person. Your identity, like how people see you,
yes,
is how now they're gonna identify your need in their space. So I feel if as a business you are not branded, like people are not clear what you stand for, then I think as board of directors in this particular company, they would need to invest in branding, like it has been said on the floor. Branding is everything. I think from branding that you understand, because I think if you're not sure, like if you're offering anything, I mean, accounting is a big field, but what in accounting do you do? Like what in engineering do you do? So if you knew yourself, you're confused. You wouldn't know how to what or whatever. So I think branding would open doors for you as a business.
Perfect. You hit the nail on the head. However, what determines that branding? See, where I want us to get to is I want us to answer the problem. sorry, answer the question. What problem are we solving as an HVAC business? So, Zugo, you alluded to there being so many uses for heating and ventilation, right? Hospitals, hotels, butcheries, funeral parlors, server rooms, right? However, we have to pick an area of specialization and figure out what problem we solve for whom. Because then that determines who we are, our identity as a business, i.e. our branding, and it also determines how we go about marketing ourselves as a business and how we solve our customer problems. So if we think about it, as a business, we know hospitals need heating and ventilation and air conditioning. Mines need heating and ventilation and air conditioning. Grocery shops, butcheries, and server rooms in companies, not even IT companies only, but any company that has servers needs cooling for those servers so that they don't overheat. So what's important here for us as BlueBridge is, as per chapter 5 of the 10-minute guide, is we have to figure out what problem we solve. And we've now got to choose. So I'm going to ask us to choose. What problem do we want to solve as a board of directors? And do we want to solve this problem for hospitals, for mines, for grocery shops, for butcheries, for funeral parlors? Whom are we targeting? Who will give us the biggest source of opportunity? And what problem would we be solving for them? Board of directors? Hazel, how are we doing with the invitations to speak? For some reason, I can't. How are we doing with the invitations to speak? For some reason, I can't do anything on my side. So I can see that there are people with I can see that there are invitations out, but for some reason, I can't do anything about it.
No, it's the same on my side.
Or is it the same?
Yeah. So I think for us at this stage, the consensus is one that we need to define the business, correctly.
Yes, we need to define the problem we solve.
Yeah, problem we solve, based on our strength as a unit. And if our strength is HVAC services, then that's what we go with.
Yes.
But one of the biggest problems entrepreneurs do when they start businesses is to try to lead how many hands touching too many things. And that doesn't work, because then you start to have the way which you can't do a good job because you have things. So it's always nice to define what it is that you are good. Focus on that, build from there. And once you are comfortable and you've got a good share of the market, whether it's repeat or once off all the time, as you grow your business, you diversify your service offering and all that type of stuff.
Absolutely.
So here, when I look at the branding of the business, there is a lot of HVAC related work, right?
Yes.
That this business is doing. And so I would say that perhaps anything else that is plumbing, piping, focus, it must stay out of this business for now. We must focus on the specialization, right?
Yes.
And then we can define it, we can play with the marketing jargons to make it attractive, and we can price it right. And when you start to define this thing in a nice way, you'll even see that you're lowering your overheads. It's a lighter business to run, and you start focusing on the volumes that you need to make and the repeat work that you need to make. Because like I was saying earlier, my understanding of this nature of the work is that it's regular, it's repetitive. So if you get a contract, your contract must at least be, either for 1 to 2 years, because they want someone who knows what had happened the previous time. And you must offer some warranties in some instances. So you want it to be a specialized effort that you are giving in this instance. So for me, if we were to eliminate anything, I would say we remove the piping and the plumbing and we just focus on the HVAC work. Electrical is part of the stuff in some instances, but electrical work is also a very specialized area.
Perfect. What I do want us to do is I want us to go down a little bit further, and I want us to specialize even within HVAC. So what we've said is we are an HVAC business. We are going to focus on that. But what I want us to do is I want us to drill down now even further and say, whom are we servicing? Whose problem are we solving? Are we solving a problem for a hospital, a mine, a butchery? Who do we want to target as a sector? Because that also speaks directly to how we spread our resources. The wider the pool of people we target, the wider we spread our resources, the more ineffective we are. But if we focus, we have more impact. So I just want to say, all those people who have requested to speak, who want to speak, who've been sent invitations, please log out of the space and log back in, and let's try and mic you up, because myself and Zugo, we can't seem to be able to authorize people for some other reason. So please log back out and log back in. Okay, so what's important is we as BlueBridge need to figure out what problem we solve. We then need to say, how painful is that problem? So if we're going to solve a heating and ventilation problem for hotels, is that problem annoying and we can ignore it? Is that problem painful, but we can bear it, but the client can bear it? Or is it painful enough for the hotels to do something about it? So I want us to then go deeper from there and say, for whom is that problem so big that they can't ignore? So now we're saying, we are an HVAC business. We want to solve heating and ventilation problems for hotels. Now, out of all the hotels we know, for which kind of a hotel or for which hotel is heating and ventilation such a big problem that they cannot live, function, and work without it? May I have a suggestion? Any kind of hotel. So what we're doing now is we're drilling down on the problem. We're drilling down to look for and target specific types of customers so we can deliver our services efficiently. So are we then saying, are we looking at boutique hotels? Are we looking at backpackers? For which of these hotel types is heating and ventilation a problem? Out of all the hotel types that you know, who can afford to live without heating and ventilation?
Sort of all hotels, they need this heating and ventilation service.
Yeah.
I can tell you a lot of the so hospitality or hoteling is a bit of a thing in that it's categorized in terms of leisure or work. So all of the customers are basically very finicky there.
Yes.
But what you want, right, is you want that your customer or your patron must have the best experience.
Absolutely.
So small things like getting into the hotel room, putting on an aircon and it's not working or it's blowing dust, those things mean that the customer is not coming back. So what you want is you want to be the preferred or available service provider
yes.
for the hotels that have high demand for the offering that they are giving.
Yes. Okay.
So we worked around the hotels in the Northern Cape, just next to those mining open cast mines there in Sishen, and the amount of dust there, it was like every 2 months you have to get an HVAC company to come and there's filters there, there's what. They are constantly changing those things, not because they need to be changed in those regular intervals, but because the environment where the hotel is located requires that HVAC maintenance work is a regular thing, as compared to a hotel that's just in Sandton or in a nice forest somewhere where there's less dust and all of that type of stuff.
Okay.
So I think even the pickings of who's the best to select, it has to be informed by our proximity to the customer in this instance. So if we were to use a South African context for this guy and say, is he located in Sandton? Is he located in Johannesburg? So is he looking to service hotels in Sandton, in downtown, or is he looking to service hotels in Randburg, wherever?
Yes.
Then the proximity then will determine, because in downtown Joburg, Maboneng and whatnot, and even in Sandton, for instance, the levels of pollution may be higher as compared to someone who's towards Artis or whatever the case is. So the demand starts to change. So when you also understand the demand, you can then be in a nice position to choose the type of customer that you want, because you understand the demand.
Okay.
So I would like say I can relocate my business to the Northern Cape because I know that dust is too much there. So I know they are constantly going to need. But there are also many other issues that we have to address before we make that decision. How many other players are in that market? The type of experience that they have. But all of those things will be informed by where we actually want to be, because now we are defining what it is that we want to do and for who do we want to do it. And we also have to talk about how much it will cost us to be able to do that type of work for the target market that we have identified.
Absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. So you're spot on, Zulu. So essentially, what we've got to do and what you've hinted at is we've now got to say, for whom is the problem most painful, i.e., a hotel in the desert in the Northern Cape, right? However, we are based in Joburg. And if we have to go and target those people, we've got to figure out how big is that market, i.e., how many hotels are there and how often would they need to be serviced? Does it make sense economically for us? And if it doesn't, which hotels are we then choosing to service? Are we then choosing to service hotels here in Sandton or in Maboneng downtown? Where is our customer base and how do we choose to service it? And so the reason I wanted us to drill down to this level is that's important for the next step. Because once we figure out that the people we are trying to assist is 5-star establishments in Sandton, they are close to us, but at the same time, there's a lot of them. They cannot afford to have their air conditioners not working when guests come in, or 5-star establishments. So because there's a lot of them in Sandton, we are then going to offer our services to those people. So now we have a target market. We know what we are selling. The next step is then for us to target and market to these people. Now that we know we are speaking to, we now have to create messages that resonate and speak directly to that problem. And that's what our marketing does, right? So in the case of Bluebridge Services, the question we've got to ask is, they're Nigerian based. What's the average summer temperature in the area that they are based in? And what does it mean for the services they offer? So, i.e., do they often have to offer more cooling services or cooling equipment or cooling machinery versus heating machinery? And are they doing it in the CBD or in the rural areas? And how big is that market? And once we've drilled down to that level, we've then got to say, how do we communicate it so these people know exactly who we are and what we do? Because what we don't want to do is, we don't want to sell our business first. So we don't want to say, hey, Zuro, or hey, Balls, we are an HVAC business. Because that means very little to the customer. What we want to do is, we want to sell our solution first. And that's the purpose of marketing. So what we want to do is, we want to say, we are a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning business that specifically targets or focuses on 5-star establishments in cosmopolitan areas. The problem that we solve for our customers, i.e. the hotel chains, is making sure that their guests are always comfortable. That's the problem we solve. So we solve the problem of comfort and of helping our clients maintain their prestige. And so when we market our business, what we've got to do is, we've got to say, we are a solution provider, or we are a group of people that can help you provide the levels of comfort and prestige that your customers expect from an establishment such as yours. And as soon as you say that to a hotel manager, they go, oh, okay, how do you do that? We provide heating, ventilation, and air conditioning services. And we can do A, B, C, and D for us. The chapter on marketing in the 10-minute guide speaks directly to this, right? So once we've gotten to a point where we as a business know who we are, what we do, and for whom we do it, and we understand the problem we're solving, then we start to speak directly to that. So are we all together? Is everybody comfortable with that perspective? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So essentially where we are now, so what we've said is, here's a business that's been struggling to get customers. We don't know why they haven't gotten any customers. And so now that that business is in a position where they have to find customers, they have to drill down and specialize, figure out what problem they solve, whom they solve that problem for, who in their client segment that problem is most painful, and then develop a marketing message that speaks exactly to that problem and solve it through the services that we provide. So in a nutshell, this is what Bluebridge Services can do to get more customers. They can do that to get more corporate customers. They can do that to get retail customers. However, in a nutshell, this is how we move forward as a board. And that then concludes this aspect of our conversation, our case review. Any questions, any comments? Any suggestions? Anything else we can offer to Bluebridge for how they can move forward?
There are so many questions, which I hope you've been trying to get them to connect here, because it could help us narrow, some of the challenges. But if they're not here, it's still okay.
Yeah, look,
It will help us.
yeah, the Mark hasn't responded to his. Unfortunately, I only have him on direct messages. I don't have him elsewhere. He hasn't responded to my text from the afternoon. So, but I think the fact that Mark is not here and there are so many questions we all have speaks directly to one of the problems that we're trying to solve, and speaks to how we move small and medium businesses forward, right? And what it highlights is that we may know what small and medium businesses look like. We may know how they operate, but every business is different. Every business has got questions that need to be answered for us to be able to move that business forward. Right? And that's the most important thing about putting together or building a business as an entrepreneur, is you have to understand that you may offer a service somebody else offers, but your business is unique purely because of the fact that you as an individual are unique and you choose to do things uniquely. Your clients are also equally unique. So when you approach your clients and you want to solve their problems, you have to be able to offer to solve their problems in a unique way, in a way that makes you special. Otherwise, why would they want to procure services from you versus somebody else? And so hopefully when we run another space and we get another case, we can get the owners of the business to participate for the case resolution. So that essentially, everybody, concludes the formal aspect of this space. For those of you that do run a business and who are concerned about how to hire the right people for your business, we are running a workshop on Tuesday, a webinar. Yes, boss, I'll take you now, noted. We're running a webinar on Tuesday, the 17th of May at 7 p.m. I will tweet the details. If you go to my profile, you'll see that we're running a webinar, or in fact, you can WhatsApp us on 073 053 1044, or you can email me at sandiso@the10minuteguide.com. So we're running a webinar on how to hire the right people. And that specifically speaks to, you started your business, now it's up and running, and now you need to build a team to keep your business going and take it to the next level. So if you're looking to do that, that webinar is 210 Rand per person. Give us a shout and we'll register you for that. Yes, Charles?
Before we close, I'd like to ask you and the co-host, in terms of someone who has zero clients, started their business, what is the most challenging thing? Like, is it getting your first client, or is it getting your business out there? Like, as entrepreneurs, who made it, like, what is the most challenging thing between those two? I don't know if you hear me.
Yes, yeah, no, we hear you. Zibo, do you want to go first and then I'll go after you?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So I hold a different perspective, to the question that you asked. There is nothing challenging in life. You just have to get your mind right. So if you are intent on doing something, you have to build around that intention. So if you know that the first prospective client is your neighbor, if you don't go speak to your neighbor, you're not going to get that business. If you know that for you to get your first client, you need bus fare, and if you don't ask your friends, or you're not gonna be able to reach that point. So we all need a mindset that says anything is possible. If you push, you will get it. So by the way, boss, most of the time we're all at the mercy of other people, right? Because they have to decide whether they give us that business or not. Our only role is when we have that business is to showcase what it is that we can do. So I have a motto that says, if you do something, do it right the first time. Leave that good impression. But you have to have the right frame of mind for that. And you always have to be positive. So I don't think there's challenges in life that we can't solve, but the mind is to be the right sense. That's what I would leave you with.
Yeah, absolutely, Zubo. I'm also 100% with you. But to extend your answer there, Zubo, also I would say the biggest problem for a small business is getting repeat customers. That has to be. Getting one customer is fairly challenging, right? So once you get your mind right and you are prepared to do the work, getting one customer or two customers, that's great. Slightly challenging, but you can manage. What becomes difficult is consistently getting customers. That's the most difficult part. Growing that number of customers is even more difficult. And so, which is why when you go back to chapters 4 to 6 of the 10-minute guide, specifically in chapter 5, I speak about building a business around solving recurring problems. If you solve a recurring problem, you have the opportunity to earn recurring income. And without identifying a recurring problem, you can go and find someone to buy a product the first time, the second time, but you'll struggle the third, the fourth, the fifth time. So Zubo made a poignant point earlier when he was talking about the hotel that's in the middle of the desert in the Northern Cape. What's great about a hotel in that environment is the fact that because of the dust, because of the wind, they regularly require their heating and ventilation systems to be maintained and serviced. So what it means is it's a recurring problem. And for you as a service provider, you will then get recurring income. The location may not be ideal. However, that's what you want to do. And so as an entrepreneur, the biggest problem you have to solve, especially when you start out, is find a recurring problem to solve so that you can get recurring business from people who have that problem. Which is also, I suppose this is now a great place to sort of tie up the discussion, is when you start a business, be very careful not to narrow your target market too much. If you start getting to the point where you are trying to drill down on specific customer profiles, chances are you will miss the mark. Because your business is new and because your business is architected around solving a problem, you don't yet know until you are much further along who has that problem. So the best way to approach it is don't look at somebody and say, I need to sell to that person. What you need to look at is you need to look for a problem and say, I need to solve this problem. And so if you are solving the problem of air conditioning, then customers are everywhere. Hotels are everywhere. One of the best places, well, there are two great places to whom to offer these kinds of services: funeral homes and butcheries. Those places cannot absolutely function without heating and cooling services. And so when you think about solving those problems, you have to figure out who has a recurring problem that they need solved. And if you find 3 or 4 clients who consistently, on a recurring basis, need you to come in and help them, you've got your consistent income. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, is our 2 cents. Remember, you can buy the 10-minute guide from our website, the 10-minute guide, www.the10minuteguide.com, or you can WhatsApp us on 073-053-1044. Any questions or comments before we jump out of the space? So this space is recorded, by the way. It's going to stay up on my profile like the previous space, and you can come back and re-listen to it whenever you want. And you can share it and refer people to it. If you do want to get on the platform, if you do want us to mic you, please log out of the space and log back in, and let's see if that works. So let me actually try that. Zubo?
Yeah, I'm here.
I don't know if I can make you. Can I remove myself and then come back in? Yeah, it wouldn't end the space, would it?
We'll have to figure out.
Okay, if we end the space, we'll start it again.
Yeah.
Let me. Okay, so it says end. No, I don't want to end. Let me see.
The people are here. They just need to accept the invitation. That's all.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that maybe I am the one who, who's stopping it all, because maybe the problem is with me, is on my side.
It's possible. But Stan just joined us as a speaker. How are you, Stan?
Hello, gentlemen. I am very well. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak here on your platform. And I just wanted to say a couple things.
Yes, Dan.
I think it's great that you're offering the foundational building blocks to any business, anybody that's interested in providing a business or a service or something of value to people in their community. It's extremely important for people to understand what they're getting themselves into, aside of the idea of being a business owner or an entrepreneur. A little bit about myself. I owned 32 health clubs. Don't own them anymore.
Okay.
And currently I am heavily involved in sales.
Okay.
Home remodels, selling high-end windows and doors.
Okay.
And just a piggyback off of some things that you mentioned that I've found to be extremely important. Not only is it important to solve a problem, but you also have to look at yourself and believe in yourself and that you are the right person in helping others in solving this problem. You have to have conviction, because all of us have obstacles that life will bring us.
Absolutely.
And if we get too hard on ourselves and we let fear consume our emotions, it'll be extremely difficult to overcome these obstacles that will end up becoming a block from this opportunity that we're trying to solve.
Absolutely.
I myself, I'm a big believer in God.
Yep.
Creator of all.
Yeah.
And if I do something that doesn't have a similar alignment with my conviction with my creator, it's going to be hard for me to overcome these obstacles and challenges, because sometimes this world can be a little tough.
Absolutely.
But when we overcome these challenges, it's like you upgrade yourself. You reach a new level.
Absolutely.
Where this obstacle that we once had is no longer seen as an obstacle, but it's now seen as an opportunity to build more, to be better, just like getting your first customer. It's going to be scary getting that first customer.
Absolutely.
It's going to be scary getting that second, third, and fourth customer. But once you're at the 8th customer, 15th customer, 30th customer, that first scary problem you had with getting the first customer, you now see it differently. It's now an opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why and that's why this space is important for us, right? And this particular conversation today. So if you didn't join us earlier, Stan, so this particular conversation today is about getting the right advice. And essentially it's based on the premise, or the fact rather, that if you're an entrepreneur and you do want to overcome obstacles, and you do want to overcome the fear of handling your first 3, 5, 10 customers, you've got to get the right advice from the right people. And the most important thing to look at there is to say, can I go to a Stan who's had a business before? Can I go to a Zubo who's had a business before? And speak to those people, because you're most likely to get the right kind of guidance from someone who's done it, someone who understands that same nervousness, that same fear, those same challenges, than you are from someone who hasn't run a business at all. Because quite often, people who have never run businesses and who don't own a business will often dismiss the ideas and the challenges you have. And they often don't understand how tough it is for, to manage your own psychology and to manage your own emotions, where one day you're absolutely elated because you've just serviced 10 customers. And for the next 2 weeks, it's absolutely dead quiet. And now you've got to worry about how you're going to pay yourself. It's super important. Zubo, you can jump in and then you'll get Stan. Sorry, Stan.
Yeah. Thanks, Stan. Actually, for me, it's something that I don't know if I'm articulating it correctly, but Stan brings a different angle here about you and the entrepreneur and the type of character that you must have. So there is a need for high levels of self-esteem when you're entering business. The level of conviction is such that you yourself must feel like, maybe I'm putting it wrong, but you must feel like you're God yourself. Because the one thing that people will pick up is the trembling in your voice that says you're not ready to receive this business or this account or whatever the case is.
Absolutely.
Different people start businesses at different times, different ages, and depending on where you are in the hierarchy of needs, in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if your self-esteem is not good, you may not be able to make it. So that's why earlier when Paul was asking about the most difficult thing, I was saying the fundamental aspect is your mindset. If your mind is still having doubt, you're not going to be able to go through a lot of the steps that you need to pass. Whereas if your mindset is one that is positive, that does not see any challenge, that wants to push forward and build step by step, everything else then is possible. So thanks for that, Stan. The space allows us to hear messages in different ways, and in business there's also a lot of qualitative aspects that we have to look at, other than just we're looking to count how much money is coming in. So I like to focus on those things. I'm not a psychologist, but I like to focus on those things with the people that I work with, just so that we have an understanding of where they are in terms of thinking, in terms of application, and in terms of just the belief in the concept that they are trying to push through to the market. So yeah, thanks for that, Stan.
Stan, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah. No, thank you guys. It's actually something that I've learned through my own experience, and it's really helped me in growing from working in the industry for somebody, and then eventually getting the courage to become the actual owner and start on my own. And starting from one club one location to 32 different locations. You know, it was quite an experience for me. I started off young. I like to think I'm still young, but that all depends on the day, because sometimes you feel really, really old and tired. I am 39.
Yeah, so relatively young.
So, you know, and I'm going to say something that hopefully, you know, others can relate to. But in the position that I am now, my obstacle, knowing the conviction side of things, knowing the value that you're supposed to provide for others, or the perceived value, right? When there's a problem, you have to have a solution. But that's your understanding of the solution. You have to understand your audience in order to tailor the solution to their perceived problem.
Absolutely.
And to do that, you have to understand their pain points.
Absolutely.
You know, so you have to be somewhat empathetic or know other people in that position to understand where their pain is coming from, so you can create the proper verbiage that appeals to them.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I feel like I am armed with those intangibles, but the tangible, where I feel like a lot of new business owners or aspiring entrepreneurs face, is where do you start? There's so many different problems, so many different concepts, and that's why I am now. I'm working for a company that I'm kind of back in square one, where I'm working for somebody else. And it's a really big company, and I'm blessed to be there because it helps me take care of my family and pay my bills and put a roof over our heads. But I know in my heart, this is not where I want to be. I want to be back in the business world. And it's a matter of, where do I start?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. So what you and Zuo have highlighted are two important things, right? So one of the things that I cover in the 10-minute guide in the book is knowing the kind of entrepreneur you are. And so, you know, there are 5 types of entrepreneurs. Survivalist, you're only starting a business because you can't find jobs. A lifestyle entrepreneur, you want to start a business because you want to supplement your income. Social entrepreneur, you know, you want to do good for your community. High impact entrepreneur, you want to build a large business like yourself, Stan. You have 32 gyms, right? So someone like you, someone who wants to build a massive business, that will mean you're a high impact entrepreneur. And then there's an investor entrepreneur. Now, the reason it's important to understand the kind of entrepreneur you are, that directs where you need to start when you want to build a business. So let's go back and walk through it, right? Technically, where do you start? You have to find a recurring problem to solve. However, that problem has to be within the realm of some area of expertise or some area that you're familiar with to enable you to solve that problem comfortably. So, if you're a high impact entrepreneur and you go looking for a recurring problem, what you are actually now looking for is you are looking for a recurring problem to solve. However, the problem has to occur at scale. Like being healthy, like wanting to stay in shape, that's a problem that happens at scale. So if your idea is to say, I want to help people get back in shape, I want to help people work out, that means then I've identified a recurring problem. Now I'm going to go solve it. If you're a high impact entrepreneur, it's critically important to understand the cost of starting and building a business. One of the things that kills businesses very early on is the lack of understanding of how long it's going to cost you, how long it's going to take you to run your business until a point of profitability. And if you don't understand that, you are never fully prepared with the injection of capital you need to run your business. One of the things that COVID did was COVID killed a lot of businesses because businesses did not have enough cash to sustain themselves through lockdown. And as a high impact entrepreneur, it is critical that you don't find yourself in that position. Which then takes us back to chapter 7 and 8 of the book of understanding what it's going to cost you to set up your business, and then understanding what it's going to cost you to operate your business over time. But this can only occur once you've identified a recurring problem to solve. So Stan, this is my roundabout way of saying where you start is find a recurring problem to solve, and find a problem that's within your realm of expertise so that it is easier for you to get going. And once you've identified that problem, then you need to say who has that problem and how many of these people exist. Because then that tells you the size of the business you're going to build. Once you have that view, then you go look for the money to help you build that business. Someone like yourself who desires to build a big business, impact people on a larger scale, it's critically important that you understand how much money you need and build that cash reserve to go and run that, to go and build that business. Because without that, what happens is you end up having to take 10 steps forward and take 10 steps back because you don't have the capital. And when you do face challenges, the business does suffer. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, no, that was really, really good. As you're explaining this, you know, the light bulb turned on for me, and you know, certain things I've ventured in the past, and I've been successful in a lot of these ventures, like owning a gym business. And there were brick and mortar buildings, you know, ranging from $2 million a building with the equipment inside to, you know, 6, 7. And then from there, you know, I used to be in the military, in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
Then I went into banking. I grew up in the family business where we had a 40-year-old brick and mortar tool store with all imaginable tools for electrical, plumbing, construction companies. And you know, then I ventured to recruiting. Then I ventured to now selling windows and doors. You know, and there's a lot. Those are a lot of different
areas.
Right, practices and areas. Yes.
Yeah, sectors to target.
When you're talking about, and it's something that I never thought was possible until you explained this to me. You know, what are your strengths? What are your, you know, the areas that you can provide others, you know, to help solve a problem? And to me, it's not really very important to start off big. I can start off very small as long as I make an impact.
Yeah.
That really benefits somebody or somebody's life or their loved one's lives.
Yeah.
And that's where I always come from in all these different practices. And it's the matter of having integrity, morals, having faith that everything's going to work out.
Yes.
And building trust with your audience or your target market.
Absolutely. So,
and, you know, relationship building has always been my key strength.
Perfect.
Which a lot of businesses end up lacking because they're just there for the money and they're forgetting the human side of things.
Perfect. So if I understand you correctly, so you're saying your passion is to be of service to others and have a positive impact in their lives.
Yes, sir.
And one of your strengths is relationship building.
Yes, that's correct.
And you recognized that there are a lot of businesses that lack that relationship building technical skill or that skill.
That's correct.
Is it possible then that your next big business opportunity would be teaching small businesses how to build relationships and manage relationships with their customers and stakeholders?
You know, not until I started listening to yes, that's something I'm realizing now. But the question I have is the how.
Yeah, so, and you know what? You are perfect where you are, right? So you currently work for a business, right? That sells high-end windows and frames, right? How good is their customer service and their customer relationship management?
Not too good at all.
Not too good at all. So let's rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. 5. Okay. So is it clear in your mind what they would need to do to get to a 10 out of 10? Or can you think about it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I can make it 10 out of 10. There's just so many different avenues or variables. Yes. Each one needs to have a solution in a timely manner. But yes.
Okay, perfect. So this business that we work for is a 5 out of 10. It needs to get to a 10 out of 10. And if we sit down, we can figure out how to walk the business customer relationship management from a 5 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10, right?
Right.
So the next step then is for us to begin writing down, or for you to begin writing down what it is you think needs to be done to get it from a 5 to a 5.5. And then from a 5.5 to a 6. And then from a 6 to a 6.5, 6.5 to a 7. Once that's done, sorry, you wanted to jump in?
No, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Once that's done, what you then need to do is then you need to start implementing it exactly as you built it. So once you've written down literally, and I'm talking about literally writing down on a piece of paper, because this is not an organization you own, because this is not an organization you control, you've got to understand that people are often going to be resistant and not receptive to some of the changes that you want to make. And in any business anyway, people are generally resistant to change. So once you've written down those things that would need to get done to get the business to a 10, you start implementing them bit by bit. So then you say, let's implement step number 1, which is going to take us from a 5 to a 5.5. And then once that's done and it's perfect, we move from 5.5 to a 6. Once you get to 10, Stan, you would have solved your first customer's problem. And you will now have a reference that you can use to get more customers. One of the most beautiful things about speaking to business owners is when you tell them or when you describe a problem that you solve, they can immediately identify it if they have that same problem. And they're not going to waste time with you giving you the runaround or whatever. They're going to say, I have the exact same problem, let's solve it. And you know what's beautiful about the position you're in, Stan, is gyms and fitness are all about customers and customer relationship management and making sure that the entire business is designed and suited to make the customer comfortable in a moment of vulnerability. So you, more than anyone else, understand the nuance that has to go into building services to support customers and their experience of the business. So I actually think, Stan, you've got your business right there.
Yeah, I was also thinking the same about the doors and windows, that he's actually in a good position to perhaps some of that's happening, I'm not sure, that he can leverage nicely around highly technical architecture or architects, designers and stuff, to offer them in the solution of these specific types of doors and windows that they are looking for. I mean, here in this instance, I'm talking from experience because I live with an architect, so I understand the level of detail, the level of finishing that they are looking for. So if your specialty is relationship management, it means it's like just taking someone to Maldives and they just see this nice blue ocean and knowing that you can just give it to them. So like maybe Stan's time is not too far from him coming back to the game in the way that it really deserves.
Yeah, I actually think Stan is right there. I think it's just an issue of just him sort of raising his head and realizing that he's actually in the perfect position to start his new business.
Yeah, it's something I didn't realize the position that I was really in, and I'm sure others on here can relate, is when you're looking for your next opportunity or this change in your life.
Yep.
Sometimes the position that you're in is giving you all the signs that I was missing, that you guys have literally helped me see, put it in my perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry, no, it's just it's really astounding when like it's what's the word? An epiphany is what I just had right now.
And that's why it's important, Stan, right? And this is why we're having the space today, right? That's why it's so important to get the right advice from the right people. Because as soon as you're around the right people and you say, hey, this is what I'm going through, this is what I've done, this is what I'm looking to do you see how us, you and I, right, you, myself, and Zuo, have moved you from a point of, I'm not really sure where to go, to a point of clear clarity in like 15, 20 minutes. So you can imagine, Stan, if you are around people who own businesses, who run businesses before, can you imagine how many problems you could solve for yourself? The kind of clarity you'd be able to get, the kind of perspective you'd be able to get. And and you know, Stan, I have exactly the same experience of challenges that you do. I used to have them all the time, consistently, which is why I wrote the 10-minute guide, because I used to, the qualitative aspect of entrepreneurship, I had it down. But the technical aspect, that's what always eluded me. And for some reason, I could never get it right. Only when I started trying to say, let me figure out how to do this, and I started speaking to people who were actually doing it, and they started walking me through how it's done even in my own business, then it became clear to me that, you know what, actually, I need to do this. Zugo will tell you, you know, Zugo has said things to me, has shared things with me I need to do for my business individually. And I have resisted, Stan. I have fought Zugo every step of the way. But eventually I've relented and I've done it, and it's worked beautifully. And in fact, this space, having this second space, was Zugo's idea. And I was against the idea initially. And so valuable. And I'm super glad we're able to help you.
No, it's extremely valuable, because it's without this conversation today, I still would have felt like, and you know, to a degree, hopeless, because you don't feel good about yourself until you like the direction that you're going in.
Absolutely.
And this idea that you guys have opened me up to, you know, it's the more I'm thinking about it and you're explaining things, like I already see a bump in the road, and I call it a learning curve, where it's the technical aspect, right? Absolutely. But the opportunity this world, the world that we live in today, it wants a solution yesterday.
Absolutely.
No matter who you're talking to, they want it done. But everybody also wants to feel like they're a part of something, that they want to feel like they're okay, regardless of the practice.
Absolutely.
They want to feel like they're heading in a direction that's going to bear fruit for them and their purpose. You know, so a big part of it, and I know this sounds, I don't know, squishy or...
No, say it. We're squishy people.
But, you know, in any practice, you know, there's the relationship. Relationship's just a word until you truly understand the humanity behind it, and it's the love, the trust. You have a customer, and it can be in architecture, it can be in fitness, it can be in construction, you know, it can be in any area. And when you're talking to your customer, who, you know, you're giving them a solution to their perceived problem, you know, and it can be fast food. They want to need to eat. You have 8 different things on the menu. Which one do they choose?
Yes.
It's a matter of understanding, getting to know them, and in that sense, you build the relationship, you build the trust. You understand that they don't like pickles, but they like a little spice.
Yes.
You know, and they don't like their hamburger to feel like it's too much moisture, mayonnaise or whatever.
Absolutely.
You want it more dry, you know, but with a little bit of moisture, so you put tomatoes, you know. I've never been in fast food. I'm just throwing it out there.
Absolutely.
But you know, but when you get to know them in such a way, and I think of architecture.
Yes.
You know, somebody wants to build a specific building.
Yes.
And you know, and they have an idea. But you know, you can build this idea for them, and you can charge a good amount of money and make good profit from it. But and to the person, the architect that designs this, he'll do all for himself because he gave them what they wanted.
Absolutely.
But if you want to separate yourself from the competition and to make a name for yourself and build a reputation, the better architect is going to give them, people don't know what they don't know.
Absolutely.
So this architect will open them up to other ideas that will probably be better than the idea that they had in mind, or open them up to potential risks down the road. You know, if they want to build a high rise in an area that has high wind or dust storms, you know, maybe you want to make something different, you know, and then just kind of help them truly come up with something that will address the concerns that they don't realize they will have later on.
Right.
And that might cost them more money, that might make you more money, or it might cost them less money and you make less money, which a lot of people don't want. But those are the people that are short-sighted. If they can think about giving themselves
yes.
longevity,
yes.
security, then they're going to talk about you and they're going to recruit other people to your business. This is going to make you more successful than the competitor that gave them what they wanted in the beginning.
Okay, Sam. So, sorry, do you want to jump in, Zua?
I was just saying, this is only the opportunity, you know, because when you build a relationship, mostly in business, it's about exposing the other party to areas that they haven't thought about, that they haven't seen.
Absolutely.
So I've got a bit of a contrast in view, but what Stan is saying. See, so we worked with this one entrepreneur who got funding, you know, everything is set up. But when I'm talking to this entrepreneur, all of a sudden, they don't know how to go and pursue the market that they said would bring them revenue. So, which is now a sad thing, because it's a risk to this heavily funded business. And when you ask the troubleshooting questions about what it is that is happening that has changed the dynamic so much. So maybe the unfortunate thing about me is that I'm a straight talker, so the relationship I build after we understand what is the work ethic looks like. So then I started to figure out that actually the owner of the business is not the true owner of the business. There is another driving force behind the business. So without that instruction, they can't move forward, right?
Yes.
And so basically, using that model, Sanderson knows this model that we've started to go back to the 4 pillars of why do you want to do the business right.
Yes.
So we're taking them back to they must plan for the market, they must plan for its compliances, they must plan for new access to funds, they must plan for the systems of needed, those type of things. And for this business owner, all of a sudden this whole thing is like, wow, how come we didn't write our business plan like this? And I'm trying to explain to them that it is not so much about what it is that you write, but it's about the conviction that you must have, so that when you understand there is a need for change at any given point in time, you must be able to implement that change to the benefit of your business, because you are out there to maximize the value that you're creating for yourself and those of your customer. So I think it's a long way for this entrepreneur, but they are in the process of rediscovering why they went and took that big credit to be able to run this business.
But actually,
so later on for me, Stan, then we can build a relationship, because then we're no longer working on the highly technical aspects of making sure that the business succeeds, but we're focusing on the complexities of the qualitative aspects of the entrepreneur to make them feel self-worthy, high levels of self-esteem that they've actualized on their own, when they think about the journey that they've traveled.
But so can I jump in here? I think you and Stan are on the same side of this argument. You're on the same side of the point. So, and let me tie it together, right? So Stan is saying, look, there's an opportunity to teach people how to engage with their customers to the extent that they can offer their customers a valuable experience that would encourage the customers to bring more business for them, referrals. You, Zubo, are illustrating, you're telling us a story about a business where someone got money and now they don't know how to go and engage their customer because they don't have this intimate relationship that Stan speaks about. And so now, because they don't have that intimate relationship, you are now have to redo that business's foundation to allow them to go build that relationship. And here's where I think there's a huge opportunity for this kind of thing, Stan. So the 2 things you have to think about now, Stan, are 2. Sorry. The 2 things you have to think about are, number 1, in a situation where there is a business that needs to connect with their customer, like this business that Zubo has identified. They've gone to investors, they've got money under a false pretense, and now they need to connect with their customer because they need to sell. How do you help them do it? Number 1. And the most important question here stands, how will you scale that ability to help those people? So if you can do it with one business and you can do it with a second business, how do you scale it? Because you can obviously do it, and that's something you have to think about.
The analogy or the metaphor that comes to mind is from what Zeus speaking of. Please excuse me if I didn't get your name correct, but you're speaking of building the car, which is, and without the car, the gas, the fuel doesn't work.
Absolutely.
So Zeus speaking of putting a car together that can operate, that can be reliable, and you can have confidence in it. That's the vehicle, the business. And where I'm talking about the gas, and that's the customers.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
And without a working car, the gas doesn't work.
Indeed. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Help me in terms of what the next step would be after you establish your protocol for the first, the second, the third business, and it all works out. How do you scale it? And that really is, probably literally the $1 million question.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's where I would have to, or anybody involved would have to brainstorm and come up with all the different variables, and compare those variables to the state of the market. And it can't just be one practice, one market, but it has to be multiples, because within multiple markets, you're going to have a lot of commonalities. But what might work very well for one market will not for another. But there will still be commonalities between the two. And that would be the skeleton of this model.
Yes.
So I'm thinking of a platform. We live in the social world. So, and it can plug and play into all these different businesses once you figure out the skeleton.
Perfect. So,
yeah.
And in fact, let's simplify it even further, Stan. So now you've got an opportunity to teach people how to connect with their customers better so they can do better business, earn more money, and keep their customers longer. So we know that that's a problem that exists the world over. In any industry, in any business, in schools, even in romantic relationships, right? So then the biggest problem we have to solve with that is scale. Like you say, do we do it on our platform? Do we do it through something else? And that's the big question. But I will say though, Stan, that actually two things. You know the answer to that question. You may not know it in this moment, but you know the answer to that question. And secondly, the answer to how you scale that kind of service or that kind of help is much easier than you think. And I would even venture so far as to say, if you want the answer to that question, ask your customer.
Yeah.
Just say, how can I get this thing to 4 other people who are like you? And see what they say.
Yeah.
One of the best. Sorry, Zulu. I was going to say, I was going to sort of wrap up at least my end and say, one of the best way to problem solve as a business is get your customers to solve your problem for you or to help you with the problem solve. Just ask them the question and see what they say.
Yeah.
Because if it affects them, they've thought about it.
Yeah. That's one of the primary things that because when you're dealing with the problem, you also want to know if the concept of solving that problem is also embedded in the customer's mind or whoever has got the problem. So you always have to ask that question to see whether the thought process, is actually aligned. But here's what I wanted to say, about scaling. Okay, scaling is a beautiful thing, right? But it's got its own merits and pitfalls, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you guys talk about the different platforms that can exist to allow for things to scale.
Mm-hmm.
First, in your book, Sandiso,
mm-hmm.
you speak about the different types of entrepreneurs,
mm-hmm.
right? Not all those entrepreneurs that are there are looking for scale. Scale is a limitation on its own, depending on the type of entrepreneur that you are.
Absolutely.
So that's the first thing that I wanted to acknowledge. Then the second thing here is, if we look at the examples of scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like music. I grew up listening to music, trying to listen to different sounds. So in the times when MySpace was a thing, I was there. but we are no longer there now. We are in other platforms, you know, your Facebooks, your this and that. To even think that I am not even on other platforms, I'm just on Twitter, shows that the concept of scale on its own does not mean that, you know, you can have the type of reach that you want. Because we always have to ask ourselves, is the solution that we are providing suitable for everybody, or is it a niche solution? Right.
Absolutely.
So when you understand that aspect of your of the market that you need to serve in relation to the nature of the solution that you have, you know, you will then be clear about the type and the nature of the scaling that you need to do. Right? I don't want to get into the deep specifics, right? So perhaps because of how Stan introduced himself in the space is that he's had so many teams, if I put it correctly, and that is his past now. But I'm sure in the lessons that he has taken, he would have some lessons that say maybe the scaling was too fast, maybe the systems of the scales were not too good. There was a particular reason why, you know, the scale didn't blow up in the way that it did. I've seen that with my own experiences. So I'm always careful to, scale is a good word to talk about, because when we talk about scale, we're thinking about revenue, quantities, you know, all of that type of stuff. But we have to ask ourselves, in the nature of the entrepreneurship that we're doing, what does scale mean to us? Is having 20 clients enough? Is making 20 sales, repeat sales every month good? If it's good, then perfect. Do you really need 1 billion? If that's the case, then you must pursue it. But every aspect of that scaling has challenges that you must overcome, and it may not be aligned to your entrepreneurial vision.
No, absolutely. Those are brilliant questions, and I think those are brilliant questions for Stan. Hey, Stan. That's Stan you have to answer.
If I can just add to it, is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
You're spot on, Tim. When I had 2 partners, and you know, I was the tip of the spear in starting the business and basically pioneered it. And you know, one thing when it came to scaling is you don't know what you don't know, and if you don't know yourself enough, and I didn't know that at the time because I was not mature enough. My ambitions, my pride, my ego were the driving force behind what I was doing, when originally it was the passion and combined with the logic. So just like, you know, on the technical side, you get the car and you put it together and you put the fuel in it, it might work just great going up to 35 miles an hour. But once you get 60 miles an hour, things start falling apart.
Yep.
So then you have to scale back. You know, well, I'm sure it's something that a lot of new entrepreneurs experience is, instead of scaling back, they'll notice a slight tick in the engine when there shouldn't be, and they go, no big deal, let me just go faster. So then let me get more fuel, and then things really start falling apart.
Absolutely.
And that's what happened with my business. 32 health clubs. I started off with 1 and I expanded to 32 in a period of about 2 years. And my foundation was spread too thin. Compromised my culture, my ability to properly train the personnel, because now we were hiring qualitative aspects of the business. Yeah, exactly. And that's, you know, and that's what ended up becoming our pitfall. But that's how I'm seeing what your message is telling me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely.
I just like to focus those aspects. I mean, I always tell people that it's great, you know, probably all of us can make money if we wanted, but how much money we make is dependent on the values or the value system that we're preparing for ourselves. I, for one, if I get new business even if I can execute that business, if I don't have the capacity to do it, most of the time I pass it on because I don't want to compromise the level of or the quality of the service that I know I'm capable of giving. So I would rather be doing quality assurance on the outcomes of another service provider rather than being the one who's spread thin in trying to execute. Right. So that's what what I like most about the quality aspect of business is that you get to teach people, entrepreneurs in most cases, to understand themselves and to also understand their limits, right? And
absolutely,
I can tell you now, everybody thinks they can do it all. But once you do a business, you know that you can't do it because you always need that support. And of course, the other thing is the personalities that we have, right? Some of us wants to be hands-on in everything to ensure that the best of the best happens for the little money that we make. And some of us don't care. We're just like, okay, I've delegated, so we'll see what happens. And each aspect of the approach can either compromise or benefit the real outcomes that we want. So I like to focus on those. That's why earlier when I was saying, I like to go for it first. We must be straight, and then we can deal with the relationship after because we've already set the parameters of what we're capable of doing. Then we can work the relationship in ways that support the bigger goal that we have.
No, absolutely. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm good.
No, so I was saying, no, absolutely, I agree with the both of you. What the both of you are reflecting on fundamentally is the systems that then form the foundation that enable the growth and the running of the business smoothly. Whether that system be culture, whether it be how you speak with and engage with your employees, whether that system has something to do with who you are and how you understand your position in the business, or whether or not that system has to do with you understanding your limitations and then extending yourself where you are unable to through your employees, through people who are capable. So I am going to call it, if you gents are okay with that. I'm really super interested, Stan, on what your journey is going to look like from here on in. So I'll follow you. So please do keep me posted. Do keep us, myself and Zubo, posted on your journey. I'd really love to see how this idea evolves for you. Yeah, go ahead.
No, absolutely. I mean, I feel like, you know, it's destiny, or, you know, it was meant to be. I don't know how this live, the spaces got on my feed, but I just jumped on it. It was calling to me, and I feel like the type of advice that you guys give, so much value behind it. You know, there's people that pay psychologists and therapists and counselors a ton of money to, you know, have all these drawn out sessions just to help them get to what I feel like I got in 30 minutes with you guys. You know, so I'm interested in this, and how can I support you guys as well? Absolutely, I'd love to stay in touch with you guys.
Yeah, so I mean, you can buy the 10-minute guide. You can buy the ebook version of it. So the book is called The 10-Minute Guide to Starting a Business: Lessons Entrepreneurs Learn the Hard Way. I'm actually going to. Are your DMs open, Stan?
Yes.
Let's see. No, I think your DMs are closed. So I'm gonna tweet you the cover of the book. So you should be able to find the ebook copy of it on, you know, the ebook platform Kobo or Barnes and Noble. Barnes & Noble, there's the ebook copy. Kobo.com also has an ebook copy. Zugo also, so I've tweeted you, let me type it in. Zugo also runs a management consulting business, and essentially, this is the kind of conversation we walk entrepreneurs through when we do that management consulting, right? So part of the idea for this space was to say, let's reach out and help entrepreneurs who may not have access to this kind of expertise. And let's walk them through that journey of how to think about building your business, what to think about, how to look at it, and where to dot your I's and cross your T's. Zugo, do you want to share with Stan how he can engage?
Yeah, on my bio, Stan, there is an email address. So, like Sanditso has mentioned now, the vision for us is very basic. We come from the grassroots. We've seen enterprises rise and fall. We've been in business ourselves. The aim really is to share the experiences that we have. It's very different when we sit with clients across the table. The approach is more structured, but we're trying to share the way of thinking that simplifies problem solving, growing businesses, things that you can think about. You don't have to hold in or expose it to high risk because you are chasing profits or revenue. So there's a high burnout rate in society and in business these days because we all want to belong. We want to belong in the club of the high net and all other stuff, but we don't really know or understand the implications of that business. So we try to just fundamentally help entrepreneurs. Not everybody is listening, but those who listen, they actually get it, and they want to implement quick. So we work with some funders, who want us to support the businesses that have been funded. Funders ask that we represent them on different boards. We do a lot of things, but the most important thing stands for us, which is something I always tell funders, is that we must first care for our health so that we can be able to think. We must not limit ourselves in the things that we read, in the conversations that we have, so that we can be able to pass on the different knowledges that we get across. So anytime, if you need to talk about something, you can get me on the email. We can reach out. But the true idea is that if people get their hands on the 10-minute guide, it may even make the cost of starting and running a business much cheaper, much easier. And from there, we can also build a good support system for people that do not have access to the book. Because we are in South Africa, and in South Africa, we get a lot of underprivileged communities with people that they just don't know how to start. Those who have started, they don't know how to sustain. Those who are sustaining, they don't know how to scale. And the efforts really are just so that we can expose people to different areas. For us, maybe we are also highly fortunate to have participated in all spheres of knowledge at a business level, at a C-suite level, at a business school level, those type of things that sort of mold you to understand things differently, which is what we're basically trying to share with people. But sometimes I also fear that our simplicity may be too complex for others, but we try to share the message, which is what we're here for. And we're grateful that you managed to join us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I'm just as grateful, and I'm appreciative of all the time and the attention you guys have given me. And I definitely look forward to following you guys and just seeing how, who knows, maybe this is a bolt-on service that I can provide for other business owners at some point down the road, and connect them to you guys.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, if you need us, if you need to sort of, I think what's important for entrepreneurs, I think like Zugo says, is you have a sounding board. And and we're available. Connect us, absolutely. Let's have a conversation. Let's touch base. If someone needs our help, we're happy to jump on board. Also, if you need a sounding board, just tweet us or get in our inbox,
Okay.
We're absolutely happy to help.
Yeah. No, guys, thanks. I think I'm gonna call it a night. It's time to go sleep so that the call doesn't get to me.
Absolutely.
So, but it was great. We will do this some other time, next time, with the same objective, maybe different topic. Thanks, Anderson.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zugo. Thank you, Stan.